Before the killings of Ghost and Wizard Brown in 1986, Demetrius Holloway and Maserati Rick controlled 75% of the drug trade in East Detroit. After the two Brown brothers were killed, all gangs scrambled for territory. A gangster known as Big Ed Hansard took Jefferson Boulevard. Robert Boyd and the 430 gang were at Warren and Connors. And the Best Friends began at Van Dyke and Harper and looked to take over the entire East Side.
Terrence Brown, a.k.a. Boogaloo, when his brother Rock and Reg exacted their revenge, and a lot of bodies dropped.
While the brothers behind the Best Friends gang were cut in half, business for Demetrius Meech Holloway was also suffering. Word on the street was that Meech was vulnerable.
Big Ed Hansard was a stylish, old-school gangster, very well-dressed. He owned a series of hair salons.
Big Ed had been one of Holloway's biggest customers. Demetrius and Maserati Rick would reportedly front Hansard the cocaine and collect the money after it sold.
From what I heard from Rick himself, you know, that Big Ed had owed him some money, you know what I'm saying, and didn't want to pay up.
Big Ed Hansard certainly could have afforded to pay Maserati Rick any money he may or may not have owed him. Ed, at this point, was going out to California and getting his own 100-kilo loads from the Crips in L.A. that had a Colombian connection.
Big Ed Hansard started moving his own product in Detroit, which didn't sit well with Demetrius and Maserati.
In fact, Big Ed's nickname, Big Ed, supposedly came from Maserati Rick's mother.
He was sleeping with Maserati's mom, and Maserati's mom called him Big Ed.
The running joke turned into deadly gunplay.
Literally, anytime they would see each other, they'd pull out guns and start shooting at each other.
Everybody was turf-worn. It was like unreal, you know? I'm like, wow, we all grew up together, you know what I mean? From having fun and making money and shopping and all that to now it's full-fledged war. That's exactly what that money did to all of us as young kids, man. It turned us from gangbangers into full-fledged animals when it came to the hustle world.
You have to remember, all these events we're talking about occurred in the space of a few years, and I'm sure that it was all happening so fast. One day they were making a couple $100, and a year later they were multiple murderers and they were counting millions of dollars.
By the spring of 1987, the Best Friends gang was making new enemies as well. The story of white boy Rick Wershey is as legendary as any told in Detroit.
White boy Rick knew Demetrius and he knew Maserati. His father sold guns. He was the only white guy around us coming up back in them days, you know? Nobody cared because he was white, you know what I mean? He was just Rick.
He was this 16-year-old white kid in a 90% black city that was a major drug dealer. He grew up in the same neighborhood with the Brown brothers, and they were friends at first, but Rick's best friend, a guy named Steve Russell, became involved in a dispute with Rock and Reg over a girl. The Brown brothers told Rick that he was gonna have to choose between Steve and them, and he chose to be friends with Steve.
Petty little disputes would erupt into murder. It had nothing to do with business, it had nothing to do with drugs, it had nothing to do with anything other than the fact that Freaky Steve was dating a girl that Rock and Reg used to date.
Freaky Steve Russell was killed as he slept by Reggie Brown.
He busted in the door with an Uzi and blew him away on the couch while he was sleeping.
A relative of Russell's was at the apartment. He was wounded but survived and testified against Reggie Brown.
Reggie was found and arrested.
Brown was convicted of murder and put away for life, but it wouldn't stick.
Next thing you know, look at the news and boom, something done happened again, you know? For some reason, Rock and Reg got out.
Rock and Reg ends up just rampaging on a death spree.
September 1987. Rockin' Reggie Brown, one of the last two remaining Brown brothers, the heart and soul of the Best Friends gang, ambushed a rival and killed him while he slept. Brown would be convicted of second-degree murder in the shooting death of Steve Russell.
Rockin' Reg ended up with a life sentence behind it.
But then he got an appeal bond and was let out of prison, which is something that never happens.
He was released within a year after a state judge ordered a new trial in the case.
The rules got broke when the money got major. You know, once the money got major, all rules went out the game.
By that time, the Best Friends, as well as their childhood pals, Demetrius Holloway and Maserati Rick Carter, had made millions of dollars selling kilos of cocaine to crack dealers throughout Detroit.
Money is the root of all evil. They become addictive, bruh. Just like the dope fiend addicted to the dope. And you get a rush when you can get $1 million or 100,000 or whatever. That's a rush, you know what I mean?
Demetrius had this spot over here right here on Mack and Gray. He had spots all around the city, but right here was a gold mine, right here on Mack and Gray, you know? Right now, we're on the east side of Detroit in Parkside Projects. Well, me and my cousin Daryl controlled this right here. We used to have $12 packs, you know what I'm saying? And $10 came to the team and $2 went to the runner. And millions of dollars made, man, you know?
Started changing around '87. That's when the Best Friends started getting on the Fed's radar and all kind of things started happening.
I was asked to supervise and prosecute cases resulting from undercover operation conducted by the Detroit Police Department and ATF. Because of our success in this undercover project, the DEA decided to join. At that point, we decided to go after large-scale drug operations, and the first one I was involved with was a Hansard case.
A kilo distributor known as Big Ed Hansard had been in a turf war with Demetrius Holloway and Maserati Rick Carter in 1987. The following year, the beef turned bloody and erupted into national news.
They were trying to shoot each other, and Maserati owned a car wash up on 7 Mile, and Big Ed showed up one day and shot him.
It's right there, you know, it's still there. Everybody was their own man, you know. Big Ed was his own man, Maserati was his own man. It brings back very, very bad memories, and it brings back memories that can't nobody ever erase from their mind or their heart, you know. A lot went on here.
When he got shot in the stomach, man, that's just wild. You know, the whole hood was like, man, you know, it's out of hand now.
Rick was rushed to a local hospital and underwent hours of surgery to save his life.
Now, at this time, the news media was really mesmerized with all these almost Shakespearean characters, and this stuff is on the news. So it's on the news that Detroit drug dealer Maserati Rick has been taken to the hospital.
He was in the intensive care unit, but was recovering and taking visitors. The next day, while he was in his room by himself, a man came into the hospital dressed in a doctor's coat. He walked into Maserati Rick's room, blew his head off, and walked away quietly into the night, and that was the end of Maserati Rick.
That was kind of the zenith or nadir, however you want to look at it, of the violence in Detroit. There were no more off-limit zones. There was no sanctuary in the hospital. You would be killed anywhere.
An associate of Big Ed Hansard would be suspected of the crime, but never convicted.
Everybody in the city was upset. Rockin' Reg and them was upset too, you know?
The childhood friends, who had all grown up on the streets together to become rich beyond their wildest dreams, gathered together to put Maserati Rick into the ground. It was a funeral fit for a kingpin.
Maserati Rick was buried in a Mercedes-Benz coffin that cost $20,000. All the royalty of the drug underworld was there. I guess he went out in style.
Crying all outside the church, you know what I mean? It was just a painful moment for the whole city at that time. It was a big mourning because we lost a homie, you know?
Everybody was at his funeral because everybody was jockeying for a position. Guys that might be doing business together on Monday were at each other's throats on Tuesday.
Demetrius Meach Holloway, who had lost his partner and childhood friend, found himself in the hardest position.
Demetrius, without a question, knew that his life was in danger and wanted to go underground. It was a assault on all fronts. The riot was on the streets, and then, the government was coming in with a full court press.
In those days, they were doing all the business over the phone, and it never dawned on them that the federal government would be listening to their conversations.
With national headlines in the wake of his partner's assassination, Holloway knew it was only a matter of time before federal agents focused their efforts on him.
He wanted to lay low, is what it seemed like to me, because it was getting pretty hot out here. A lot of people were getting killed.
November 1988. 4 masked men draw guns at the epicenter of East Side Detroit, the Top Hat hamburger stand.
Somebody fires some shots in the air, throws Demetrius Holloway in a trunk, and he disappears.
Next thing you know, I'm looking at the news and breaking story come on, Meach got shot. I'm like, damn, you know what I mean? Not again.
The brazen public attack was only part of the surprise.
3 months later, I get a phone call in the office, but it sounds like Demetrius said, he's dead. So I picked it up, I said, hello? He says, hey, it's the dead calling.
By 1989, Reggie Brown, the oldest living Brown brother at the time, was back on the streets of Detroit and playing the same game that had earned him his fierce reputation. Rockin' Reg was almost immediately implicated with the Best Friends gang in a triple homicide. It was a drive-by shooting in broad daylight. The target had been another member of the Best Friends gang, who had been arrested on a gun charge.
Reggie thought he was cooperating, so they wanted to eliminate him.
A little girl was one of the victims.
Police believe Reggie Brown shot up this East Side home on Buckingham Street. They say he killed 3-year-old Lori Roper, her uncle Harry Roper, cousin Chip Austin, and his friend Lawrence Gainey.
The Best Friends, at this point, were knocking each other off because they all knew they could put any of the other ones away for life. They had committed so many murders.
When you're dealing with these crews, you always got somebody out that crew, man, that's gonna turn on you, And that's what really ate them inside and out, you know what I mean, when they people turned on them.
One of the first in the crew to come forward was Nate Boone Kraft. After his brother was killed, he blamed the Best Friends.
He had had a falling out with Rockin' Reg and Boogaloo and ended up turning against them.
Nate confessed to 30 murders, and not long after, the Best Friends were indicted. Nate and Kraft went into witness protection.
One kingpin at war with the Best Friends, who everyone thought had disappeared, came out of hiding. The reports of Demetrius Holloway being kidnapped at gunpoint were all wrong.
He made it look like he was kidnapped and murdered. And about, 3 months later, he was back in the streets.
Oh man, the kidnapping was just a hoax, you know what I mean? He wanted just to make people think, he's got kidnapped, but all the time he wasn't. Meek was somewhat chilling, man, and we all laughed about it, All of us laughed about it when we heard that.
By all accounts, he should have stayed in the shadows. Less than a year after faking his own kidnapping, he was gone for good.
He was killed in a downtown men's clothing store. just like a block and a half away from the police headquarters.
It happened at the Broadway, a department store, in broad daylight.
The Broadway was kind of a stomping grounds of judges, lawyers, and big gangsters. Downtown Detroit was probably considered kind of a neutral zone because there's no real population down there. It's just shopping, and I guess Holloway felt comfortable.
Demetrius went with, I believe, a girlfriend of his to go buy clothes, specifically, I think, a pair of socks. He was at the counter, and a BMW pulls up to the front of the building.
The killer walked into the store, shot him multiple times, and then escaped.
Blows his head off, snaps his fingers, said, "That's done," and starts literally whistling zippity-doo-dah as he walks out the door.
They killed Holloway, walked back outside, got their car and left. And they weren't caught for 15 years.
A Detroit thug named Les Milton was convicted of the shooting in 2005. His brother acted as the getaway driver, but their motive remains a mystery.
The Milton brothers ended up confessing to the murder of Demetrius Holloway, but they never, at least officially, told who gave them the order to do it.
Rumor has it that it came from the Brown brothers, but it's still a mystery. Demetrius Holloway's murder at the Broadway goes down in the Motor City as one of the most notorious gangland killings ever.
The Brown brothers, the founders of the Best Friends gang, had grown up with Holloway, worked with Holloway, and also warred with Holloway.
Brown brothers flee, and they're not seen of or heard of again in Detroit.
All these murders and this stuff happened in a pretty condensed 4 or 5 year period, but by the 90s, Best Friends had either killed everybody, chased them out of town, and a few other people were incarcerated or out of the game.
By 1992, federal authorities were still after the two surviving brothers, Rockin' Reg and Boogaloo.
The Best Friends indictment was huge. They had set up operations in New York, Philadelphia, Ohio, Virginia, Indiana, West Virginia, Kentucky. They were all over the place.
We were able to secure, I think it was first in the nation, roving wiretap authorization.
At the time, the technological advance allowed agents to track the Brown brothers' phones anywhere in the nation.
Reggie Brown was arrested on the streets of New York. Detroit police know Brown as Rockin' Reggie, and they've been looking for him for years.
They're eventually able to track the Brown brothers to New York, and they stage a sting at a Mercedes dealership in Manhattan.
Rockin' Reg was taken into custody. His brother Terrence hopped on a motorcycle, shot through Manhattan, and got away from the feds.
And in something that would seem like it would be out of a Denzel Washington movie or something, Boogaloo gets ahead of the motorcycle and goes on a high-speed chase that lasts hours around New York, eventually eluding authorities. And, you know, he gets away again.
They would find him 2 months later in Atlanta, wrapped in duct tape in the back of a pickup truck.
There was a crooked lawyer here in Detroit that put together $600,000 and sent it down to Atlanta so that Terrence Brown could do a major drug deal and reinvigorate the Best Friends.
He is found dead in an Atlanta hotel parking lot.
We had a surveillance video of the vehicle being dropped off and people getting out of the vehicle and departing the area.
Boogaloo, which was Terrence, had been killed supposedly by his own crew.
It was Charles Wilkes and Stacy Colbert. They decided to get rid of Boogaloo Brown because they were afraid that Boogaloo was going to kill them. So they killed him first.
The inner circle of the Best Friends decided that Terrence Brown had to go.
Every group ends the same way. Very few of them fade into the woodwork. Very few people go into retirement and go live in a nursing home. It ends the same way for every drug group. Eventually, the feds get them.
While there was only one Brown brother left standing, the federal government took down everyone related to the Best Friends.
All told, we prosecuted approximately 60 individuals. Those are the people that were still alive because a number of them were killed before they were charged.
I read an FBI report on the Best Friends, and it characterized them as the most murderous black gang in United States history. During their case, there was dozens and dozens and dozens of homicides brought up. One of the lawyers described it to me that there were so many murders they couldn't remember. You know, did I kill that guy on Thursday and we killed this other guy on Friday? Oh, no, that wasn't Steve we killed that day. That was Joe we killed that day. They talked about murder like a dog walking into the street and getting hit by a car. It just didn't mean anything.
I grew up here in Detroit, Michigan, on the east side. When I was 9 years old, my stepfather got murdered in front of me and my mother. From that point, I got involved with gangs, drugs, and violence by the time I was 10 years old. I eventually left Detroit in '89, for good, never to return. I wanted to better my life, and I wanted to show my mother that I could do more than just sell drugs and gangbang. So that was the turning point in my life when Demetrius and Rick got killed. Because at the end of the day, it's a penitentiary or the graveyard, man, so you have to make a choice.
What's kind of sad, amongst many other sad things, is that for all these hundreds and hundreds and millions of dollars that were generated in the streets of Detroit, one look around Detroit will show you that it's all gone. Legacy of the Best Friends gang is death and destruction. It's just a legacy of sadness, just like the whole city of Detroit itself.